it's
There we go.
all right. Trying to see where I can find all the comments and stuff. If I can see these. Wonder if it'll hook up to the YouTube.
You might have to pop out your chat window.
Okay. Yeah, put it up where it says group chat, or where the for the live stream.
I would pop it out of the live stream one.
Okay. I figure out how that goes. I'm so new to this, man. I apologize.
Not at all. It's all good fun.
But yeah, and then we'll get this party started. That way we can get you introduced. I know I'm not sure how many people are, at least that are a part of my community, are aware of who you are. But yeah, man. Trying to see if I can find the link here. Da-da-da. This is going so slow. Holy shit. Are you seeing it on your side?
I won't be able to see your chat.
Okay. Get signed in. All right. Looks like. Yeah, sure. Cool. All right, Bart.
Hey.
So, welcome, man. I appreciate you coming on with me. I know it's like super duper early in the morning back home in the States, and very, very late, early morning for you as well. But let's go ahead and just introduce you, man, and then we'll start off by basically just telling people who you are, what is it that you do, your background, and yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Okay. So for those that haven't come across me before or seen any of my stuff, my name is Bart Kay. I call myself the Nutrition Science Watchdog on YouTube. So go and check out my channel after this. I've also got a Patreon there, which you can support if you think that's of value. I come from a standpoint of I did a stint of sort of 17 odd years in academia. I was a senior lecturer, a senior research scientist, and an external consultant. I've got 3 advanced degrees. The first 2 are both exercise physiology, physical performance, preparedness, that kind of stuff. So the kind of work I did was working with organisations like the New Zealand All Blacks, the rugby team. I did some stuff with the NRL Rugby League referees in Australia. I worked with the Australian Defence Force a bit, and then I also did some stuff with the New Zealand SAS soldiers as well. Just to sort of help them with their preparedness and getting ready for what it is they have to do. I've also, have secondary interests throughout my academic career in aspects of health and physiology generally. The last 3 years I ended up teaching cardiovascular pathophysiology, so heart, lungs, blood vessels, how they work, what happens when it goes wrong, how does it go wrong, why does it go wrong, why do we get heart disease, all that kind of stuff. And also throughout my career, obviously in sport and exercise and physiology, I was interested very much in human nutrition. So I've done a lot of study into that, and I've published some research into that. I've written some book chapters on that kind of stuff. I've taught courses at university in nutrition, et cetera, yeah, and sort of also I've taught things like statistics and research methods and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of, all your high level academic bells and whistles, smoke and mirrors, if you like. I also come from the standpoint of being a supporter of the carnivorous lifestyle, which
Yes.
I know is probably going to be something that we'll be talking about tonight, I guess.
Definitely, man. That's definitely something we want to talk about.
Cool.
So, you mentioned the things about atherosclerosis, and that was one of the major things that had kind of like really got me like really keyed into your channel.
Mm.
With LDL and all this stuff, because I'm sure my viewers know that over the last 21 months, I have basically gone down the vegan route and was extremely like, just tuned into it in a sense where I guess you can say that I just believed in it as far as it being the most optimal way of eating. But the more I started to do my own research and really dove into it, it just, when you really think about it, if you absolutely have to supplement on a diet, then it just is not the most optimal way of eating.
Mm.
So that's kind of the conclusion that I came up with. Now, I don't think that it's going to be the most unhealthiest way of eating. I feel like if you're a regular human being and you don't really push yourself, actively, you don't engage in any like physical exercise, like in extreme exercises, then I feel like it's okay. But the one thing that I started to realize for my own self personally was that the longer that I went, that it just, I was feeling some sort of detrimental effects as far as my ability to be able to engage in with my training and everything. So yeah. So anyways, I know you've clearly opposed this, and that's one thing that I want to kind of touch in on is like, for example, in the vegan community, plant-based community, whatever they want to call themselves, they basically say that eating meat is or any animal product is extremely unhealthy. So that is my first question to you: is eating meat actually unhealthy to consume?
Okay, in short, no. Um, there's no evidence that would convince me remotely that that is the case. Um, out of interest this weekend, one of the other people I'll be talking to online is Dr. Garth Davis,
Ooh, I'm looking forward
who,
to that one.
yeah, me too. He tells me that we'll be talking Friday afternoon time stateside. So that'll be Saturday morning, very early here in New Zealand, and it will be probably very early Friday morning or Saturday morning where you are. Friday morning, I'm not sure. We're no good on time, but
Right.
anyway, it'll be happening. You'll hear about it. So I don't know if you saw it, but Garth put out a video a few weeks ago where he came on and gave all the reasons why he believes that eating meat is bad for you. He started out by saying you can't get vitamin C on a carnivorous diet, and I'm like, really, Garth? What? So that's the first question I'll be asking is whether he wants to rephrase that one at all, because obviously you can.
So, okay, how do we get vitamin C in a carnivorous diet?
Well, that comes mainly that the biggest source of vitamin C on the carnivorous diet is from your organs. Mainly, like liver is actually the biggest source of vitamin C. There's a storage there. As it turns out, on a carnivorous lifestyle, your need for vitamin C is actually a great deal lower than it is on either a mixed diet, a standard American or standard Western diet, or indeed on a vegan diet. And there are a number of reasons around that. I've got a really good video about that on my Patreon, actually. If people want to go and check that out, they can. I cover that in a lot of detail over there, so you can certainly go and check that one out. But in short, vitamin C is needed for a number of reasons in the body. One of them is an antioxidant requirement. As it turns out, on a carnivorous diet, your need for dietary antioxidants is a great deal less. And that's just one of many reasons. So if you want the sort of full list of reasons, I would go and check out that video on my Patreon site. It's real good, by the way. So, yeah, Garth said you can't get vitamin C. And then he went on to talk about things like TMAO, NEU, 5GC, and all these sort of latest theories that really a faction of nutritional researchers, and it is the vegetarian and the vegan faction of those researchers, I would imagine,
Right.
who are pushing a certain agenda. and they are looking for reasons to demonize meat as a nutritional source. They're looking for reasons to say this is unhealthy. They've put forward a number of hypotheses, like I've named a couple there, the TMAO and the NEU5GC ideas. They are hypotheses. They're not established scientific facts. They're not, if you eat meat, you're going to die 2 weeks from Tuesday from cancer or heart disease or anything else.
Right.
So, in short, my very firm belief, based on my very significant engagement with the science, with the published literature, both in reading it and also in producing, a number of research outputs myself as a research scientist in my own right, it doesn't stack up to say that eating meat is bad for you or that eating meat subjects you to any kind of increased risk of any kind of illness whatsoever. Actually, it's all smoke and mirrors. All the reasons why, I say these things, it's not just because I feel like saying it. I'm saying it because that's my interpretation, my reading of the science. And as I say, I do give all my reasons for what I'm saying very clearly, both on my YouTube channel in part, but obviously more fully with more detail and more science on my Patreon channel.
Right.
So that's kind of where that one sits. So the short answer is no, eating meat is not bad for you.
Yeah, and honestly, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, if we look at just people in general, especially over the long term, you're not going to see a lot of these diseases that have arisen as of late, like over, let's say the last 60 to 70 years. I feel, cancer and heart disease and all this stuff has become much more prominent. And I actually feel like it's because of the introduction of more processed foods rather than, let's say, eating meat. Because I was looking at, what is this, Dr. The carnivore diet guy, what's his name?
Oh, Sean Baker.
Yeah, I was looking at Dr. Sean Baker's video, and he, because, everyone wants to talk about inflammation and C-reactive protein, especially being caused with the consumption of meat. Well, I looked at his video when he had gotten his test done, and he basically had zero inflammation whatsoever, and he eats a completely 100% carnivorous diet. So there's no carbohydrates, there's no plant matter whatsoever in his diet. And I even have my own personal clients. I make sure that they get their blood work done, periodically, and also the cholesterol levels as well. These people's cholesterol levels have been lower than mine. I'd been 21 months as a vegan. I got my blood work done right before I started reintroducing some of these animal foods back into my diet, and my total cholesterol was at I believe 140.
Okay.
I have a client that religiously consumes meat on a daily basis, bodybuilding style nutrition, and his total cholesterol was 130. Triglyceride levels were at like 70. So they were definitely 100% in normal range. So that's the next question is, what is the correlation between, so let's say, consuming animal foods with cholesterol in them and with our own serum cholesterol levels?
Okay. So basically, my reading of the literature tells me that at any given time, 80% of the cholesterol in your body, be that in your cells and indeed in your blood, is actually not from your diet directly. It's not from consuming cholesterol in your diet. That's like about a 20% contributor, if you like, to your cholesterol levels, give or take for individual differences. Mostly the cholesterol in your body is synthesized by your body, and it's synthesized from acetyl coenzyme A, which is the very first intermediary of the Krebs cycle, or tricarboxylic acid cycle. Basically, where does that come from? Acetyl coenzyme A is the very first building block that all your foods are broken down into in your body, be those fats or carbohydrates or proteins, doesn't matter. They all end up as acetyl coenzyme A, and it's acetyl coenzyme A that then goes through a number of steps in a metabolic pathway that then leads to molecular cholesterol. So the actual consumption of cholesterol in your diet really doesn't make a great deal of difference directly to your cholesterol level. If you eat too much cholesterol, you will just shit it straight back out. Basically, you're not going to get excess cholesterol in your blood from eating foods that are heavily laden with cholesterol. And as it turns out, excess cholesterol in your blood is not a risk factor for heart disease or any other illness anyway. So basically, why do we have cholesterol in our body? We have it in our body because it's absolutely vital for life, and it serves many, many purposes. For example, cholesterol by weight makes up 50% of every cell membrane in every one of the 3 trillion cells in your body. Like, for example, testosterone, that's made directly from cholesterol. Estrogen, if you're a woman, same deal, that's made directly from cholesterol. Myelin sheaths around your nerves in your peripheral nervous system and many of your nerves in your central nervous system, in other words, your brain. Myelin, that's made from cholesterol. Vitamin D, which activates basically every other enzyme in your body, that's made directly from cholesterol, etc., etc. I could go on all day. Without sufficient cholesterol in your body, you will die very, very quickly. Okay. Now, what controls the level of cholesterol in your body? It's your genes and the interaction of those genes with the environment in which they find themselves. They are reactive things, and these are genes that have survived 3.8 billion years of natural selection. These genes know what they are doing. They've been around a lot longer than the medical profession. They've been around a lot longer than science as we know it today. They've been around a lot longer than the statin drug pharmaceutical companies that want to sell you their dangerous, deadly, contraindicated poison and want to sell you a bill of goods that tells you need to get your cholesterol down. You do not. Your cholesterol level in your blood is exactly what it should be because your genes know exactly what they are doing. That I say with the caveat that there is a 1 in a million in the population genetic disease that means that person is completely unable to get cholesterol out of their blood and into their cells. They don't have the receptor. Those people usually die before they reach 15 years of age, and it's not because of elevated cholesterol in the blood, it's because of lack of cholesterol elsewhere. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically the whole concept that cholesterol is dangerous, that cholesterol is bad for you, that there's such a thing as too much cholesterol in your blood, absolute, utter nonsense. It's rot from the ground up. There is no science to support that theory whatsoever. So that's kind of where I come from in terms of that's what I've been teaching for more than 15 years in universities to up-and-coming medical students at great personal cost, I must say, because they being the establishment who are bought and paid for by the pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
I was, as far as they were concerned, because I was prepared to get up on my hind legs and say, hey, you guys are selling a lie here. And that's basically what it is.
Well, I mean, when it comes to pharmaceuticals, that's essentially what it's going to be. It's just, boils down to money at the end of it. So if high levels of cholesterol in your blood doesn't necessarily result to heart disease, then what is the exact cause of atherosclerosis then?
Okay, that's a great question, and it's one that when you look at the actual mechanisms and you get really stuck into it, it becomes actually very clear what the situation is. The situation is that the requirements for atherosclerosis to develop are inflammation in the vascular epithelial cells around the largest of your arteries, and it is concentrated around the bifurcation zones where the arteries split. It's also concentrated where you've got a curve, for example, around the main aorta. It's also concentrated around the inside curve and not around the outside curve. So that's really interesting. If cholesterol was the cause, and cholesterol is in your blood and it's dispersed evenly in your blood, then the atherosclerotic lesions should also be evenly distributed around your entire vascular tree, which means they should be on both the arterial side and on the venous side. That's not what we see. Atherosclerosis only occurs in the high pressure side. It only occurs in the arterial side. You never get atherosclerosis on the venous side of your vasculature. That's interesting. It's the same blood with the same cholesterol in it. And also, it's not even evenly distributed in the arterial side. As I said, it's around the inside of the curve and not the outside. And when you've got a bifurcation zone like that, it's around the outsides of that. So what's going on? Basically, we need several things in order for atherosclerosis to occur. First of all, we need either a physical damage, it's usually physical damage, to those vascular epithelial cells, and that's going to require A, hypertension, high blood pressure, or chemical derangement of some kind, chemical irritation of some kind, like, for example, what you will definitely get on a plant-based diet, because plants are full of irritants. Why are they there? Because plants don't want you to eat them, actually. That's their defense mechanism. And systemic inflammation, an immune response to all of that kind of stuff, irritated cells, loose gap junctions, that kind of thing. So high blood pressure, damaged cells, loose gap junctions, and then the lesions will develop in zones where there is turbulence, so that you've got high pressure, but you've got the blood that hangs around those areas for a long period of time. And that gives time for the cholesterol basically to get jammed in there and to get adhered on.
Right.
And when the blood's racing past, think about it like trying to jump off a moving bus into a gap between two shops, which is only a few feet wide. And the bus is moving at 50 miles an hour. That's going to be a hard job to time that right and get in there. If the bus is just crawling along the road at 20, 30 miles an hour, you're going to jump straight in there, no problem. So that's what's going on, basically. Now, your body will not react in a negative way to your own cholesterol as generated by your body. That's your native protein. So why would your body react to it? Your body only reacts when that native cholesterol becomes chemically altered. It becomes deranged. How does that occur? It occurs either by oxidation, because it's been jammed in those loose gap junctions, or it's been irreversibly bound up on the microcalyx of these epithelial cells due to the inflammation. So then the blood rushes past constantly for a period of time, and that cholesterol molecule, that LDL molecule that's stuck in there, will become oxidized. Then your body goes, that's not my native LDL. That could be an invading pathogen. I need to react. So you get an immune response, macrophages, white blood cells that turn up and start spewing basically hydrogen peroxide, bleach all over it. So that inflames the situation still further. You get this chronic inflammation. It never resolves. You get this catch-22 situation, this runaway situation, and that's basically it in a nutshell. So by way of summary, undamaged, uninflamed, normally functioning vascular epithelial cells do not experience atherosclerosis, irrespective of the level of cholesterol in the blood. The cells must be physically injured by high blood pressure or by irritants of a chemical nature, be those environmental or be those in your food, whatever it is. Sometimes it can happen because of infections. Your body will react to the infection. You get an inflammation situation. Now, if you remember, I said a few minutes ago that 50% of every cell membrane in every one of those cells in your body is cholesterol. That makes it clear why a damaged cell would call out for more cholesterol, why your body would create more cholesterol, because you need that cholesterol as a raw material to make the repair to the cells. So that's why you find cholesterol around atherosclerotic lesions, and that's why you find a temporal association between the level of cholesterol in the blood and heart disease. It's not because cholesterol causes heart disease, it's because cholesterol is there to fix the problem.
Right.
So the analogy I use is, I usually say to people, well, listen, anywhere in the developed world where there's a major forest fire that breaks out, within a very short period of time, if you go and have a look, you're going to find fire crews at that major forest fire. Okay, because we find those fire crews at that forest fire, and we always find fire crews at forest fires. Does that mean the cause of forest fires is fire crews?
Exactly. No,
Well, no, it doesn't. It does not. And that's what I've been arguing for, as I say, 15, 17 years or so. And, there are a bunch of academics that want to take shots at me and want to spuriously cite this research and that research and talk about all this misinterpreted data, which, I have fun with those guys and have fun destroying them. You'll see a video I posted just today, actually, on my channel, which does exactly that with this person that calls himself Dr. Ricky, that put out this 1 hour and 40-minute video saying this is why atherosclerosis occurs. And he said, native LDL is pro-inflammatory. And I basically spent half an hour saying, nope, sorry, evidence doesn't show that. Research doesn't show that. Wrong again, Charlie Brown. So that's the kind of thing I do online, basically, is try and educate people as to the truth. I have no axe to grind. I have no product to sell you. I have no drug to lower your cholesterol or raise your cholesterol or do anything to your cholesterol. All I have is a knowledge base and a willingness to share it with people. So that's where I'm coming from.
Right. So, I mean, because that was one of the biggest things, man, is like they want to, again, the vegan community, vegan doctors per se, want to push out a narrative that this is the cause of it. But I just wasn't so much sold. And, of course, this is why, I wanted to ask you that question. So let me ask you this. Then, for example, you have some of the doctors that were putting out that how they were able to reverse some of the calcification within the arterial walls over an extended period of time using a plant-based diet. Do you think that same thing is you're able to do accomplish the same result with a carnivorous diet?
Yes, absolutely. And there's a very good reason for it, John. And it goes like this. Basically, the worst possible diet that any human being can consume for their health long term is the standard Western or standard American diet.
Absolutely.
It's the one with mixed macronutrient profile. And it's not the worst diet because of all the crap in it, because of all the processed stuff and all the sugar and all that, although that stuff is terrible. Even if you took all of that stuff out and you had a diet that was all whole foods, all natural foods, but it was a mixture of plants and animal sources. So you've got a reasonably high level of carbs and a reasonably high level of fats in the same diet, then you've got a problem.
Right.
The reason you've got a problem in that case is because that impinges on a metabolic system called the Randall cycle, named after its inventor, obviously. It's also sometimes referred to as the glycerol fatty acid cycle. Basically, what that cycle does is that fats and carbohydrates compete with each other in terms of if you've got both of those things floating around, they actually try and outcompete each other to be the stuff that enters into the cells and is used for energy. What then happens is the cell actually starts to starve of energy because neither can get in because they compete each other out.
Right.
And then the cell starts to starve and then the cell becomes inflamed. So that you've got a systemic inflammation going on. And as we spoke about before, inflammation is the cause of atherosclerosis heart disease. Inflammation is also the cause of insulin resistance. It's also the cause of type 2 diabetes. It's also the cause of obesity. It's also the cause of Alzheimer's, dementia, many of the cancers, etc., etc., etc. Inflammation that's chronic is not what you want. It's bad stuff. And also because you've got that glycerol fatty acid cycle fully activated, the fats and carbohydrates are out competing each other, that tells your body that it's now fall time, it's now autumn time, you need to store fat for the winter, because when you eat carbs and fats, when you think about it, how we evolved in the seasons, the season where carbs and fat were available together was the fall.
Right.
And so that tells our body winter is coming. Let's put on fat and let's store up for the winter. So we've got a two-edged sword there. You've got getting fatter and you've got getting more and more insulin resistant and more inflamed and more heart disease and more dementia. Basically all the ills of Western society, you can put them down to a mixed macronutrient diet. Okay. So for free, you don't even have to go and join my Patreon for this. That is the take-home message from me to you people today. If you want to improve your health and you are eating a standard Western or a standard American diet, even a reasonably healthy one that doesn't have the crap food and the junk food in it, if you eat a lot of carbs and a lot of fat in your diet, you're in trouble sooner or later. Okay, so if you get rid of one of those, fats or carbohydrates mostly, that will release or obfuscate your risk in that area in terms of the getting fat and being inflamed and all those different illnesses. That's why the vegan ideologues, the vegan doctors, the vegan fraternity, that's why they say, oh, our diet is the only one that's been shown to reverse heart disease. Okay, yes, it absolutely will reverse that heart disease. It will reverse that atherosclerosis over 3 or 4 or 5 years. It will regress those plaques, and there's no surprise to me in that whatsoever. A carnivorous diet will do exactly the same thing for exactly the same reason. We just don't have the data on that yet. That research has not yet been done.
Right.
So they are right in saying it's the only diet that's been shown to do this, correct? But that doesn't mean the carnivorous diet won't do it. What I'm telling you is it absolutely will achieve the same thing. The difference, however, is one of those diets, the vegan diet and the carnivorous diet, one of those diets is definitely nutritionally deficient. One of those diets requires you to supplement if you want to maintain your health, and one of them does not. Okay? One of those diets has an 85% failure rate within 5 years. One of those diets does not. Okay, so if you're going to get rid of a mixed macronutrient diet, and that is the message, boys and girls, get rid of that mixed macronutrient diet, pick one of those two diets.
Right.
And I would pick the one that's not deficient.
Yeah, because I mean, I've tested out every diet you can think of because I always believe that in order to really find out the truth, you have to be able to test it out yourself. And while I was doing the vegan thing, I tried out like fruitarian, for example, so basically strictly fruits, and I did see that like a lot of the inflammation did kind of dispel, but the one negative effect that I had was that it was just like it was almost like I was wasting away in a sense. Like I started losing a massive amount of weight very quickly, but I did feel better. I would test my blood sugar, so like contrary to some of these like carnivore people, like Frank Tufano, for example. I know he really likes to shit on a lot, but I would test my blood sugar often. I would test it fasted. I would test it 3 minutes after a meal, and I would literally consume about 300 to 400 grams of carbohydrates in one sitting. And then I would also test my blood sugar again 3 hours after, and it would run like when my fasted blood sugar was around 75. 30 minutes after consuming, let's say, 300 grams of carbs worth of grapes, it only rose up to 97. And then by 3 hours later, it was back down to normal. And like you said, is because of the lack of the consumption of both carbs and fats. If you do consume them both at the same time, then it will cause some sort of like insulin resistance, more or less.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
So yeah, that's the one thing that I did find out. And then whenever I did consume a diet that was both, that contained both carbs and fats, and my blood sugar would remain elevated a little bit longer, or a lot longer rather. So I did see those that kind of response as far as like inflammatory response in my own self. So absolutely. Now, I wanted to get into this whole like whenever Sean Baker had did his blood work, and it showed that his testosterone levels were rather, I guess, kind of low.
Yeah, sure.
Do you think that had anything to do with his diet, or what do you think may have caused for that to occur?
Look, I think there are a number of possibilities, John, and it's really hard for me to point to which one it would be, or indeed whether it's a combination of a number of different factors. The man is, advancing in years. Right. So you would expect that there may well be a natural, genetically imposed reduction in his basal or normal testosterone level as a function of that. I don't know. There may well have been some interaction with his diet in some way. There's no mechanism that I'm aware of that would lead someone on a carnivorous diet to have a lowered testosterone level. I mean, at the end of the day, testosterone is synthesized directly from cholesterol. So, there's no reason to suspect that a carnivorous diet consumer would be short on that. So if there's something interfering with that enzyme that makes that metabolic reaction occur, I'm not sure what it is. The other thing is that, Sean Baker's results are N equals 1. I mean, that's not science. That's an anecdote. Okay, Sean Baker.
Of course.
Yeah, Sean Baker on one occasion had a blood test that came back with relatively low testosterone. Okay, now I've seen some other blood results that he's come out with at other times when it wasn't. Okay,
Right.
so again, it might have just been normal variation within that one individual for whatever reason.
I
He
agree.
may have done a fuck ton of deadlifts or something the day before, and that can lower your testosterone the day after, whatever, who knows. But as I say, the vegan ideologues will jump straight on that and say, "Oh, look, he's got low testosterone," or
Right. I mean, because I'm asking because I'm sure there's people there that are wondering.
I mean, people fucking look at the man. Does he look like he's suffering from low testosterone? He's a beast.
Yeah, he's what, 50 years old? I mean,
he's 51 or 2 years old. He's I think he's 6'7" or 8.
yeah, he's a big guy.
He's a big, he's got a lot of muscle mass. Not as much as you, John, of course, but he's getting there. He's a world record holder in the Concept 2 rowing ergometer.
Amazing.
That does not happen if you have low testosterone, any of that.
Right.
So forget it. It's ridiculous, basically.
What would you even say because let's say, for example, his testosterone levels were low. Then how does that correlate then to putting on muscle and maintaining the muscle mass that he has been? Do you think that has any correlation with that? Or does it okay, let's just talk about building muscle then. What really causes the body to essentially put on new muscle tissue?
Okay, well, I mean, your muscle fibers are trainable. You have type 1 A and B and type 2 fibers. That's sort of the nomenclature I'm using there. It refers to a system where you would have the type 1 would be your small oxidative slow twitch fibers, the kind of fibers that you would have predominantly if you were a highly aerobically trained athlete like a Mo Farah or any of these guys that do sort of medium to long distance type events and train inappropriately, as it turns out, for many hours a week, doing hours and hours and hours of aerobic type exercise at well below maximum intensity. What that does is strip muscle mass off you because it trains your muscle fibers to become more that way. Because the type 1B fibers are an intermediate type fiber between the aerobic type and the more glycolytic, the fast twitch, the powerful, the big diameter ones. And if you train aerobically, then your middle fibers will move that way and your muscle mass overall will get smaller. It doesn't affect the number of muscle fibers that you've got in a given muscle. That's determined genetically at birth. Humans will build muscle mass by hypertrophy and not by hyperplasia, which means you have the same number of fibers, but each fiber gets bigger. So when you do heavy resistance training, basically what happens then is that the middle fibers and the top fibers are trained and they all get bigger and more powerful and stronger and more glycolytic, less aerobic in their makeup. They physically, the protein structures physically change. Those fibers physically get bigger. And so that's why your muscle will get bigger. Obviously, there are a number of hormones involved in regulating that. Insulin-like growth factor would be an important one. Insulin itself is important. Glucagon is obviously important. Thyroid hormones involved in all of that. Your circadian rhythms are important. All of those things come into play. But on a physical level, why do you put on muscle mass when you do heavy resistance training? It's because each one of the fibers that you've got in the muscle gets bigger, basically.
Right. So it's just basically boils down to the resistance training more than anything. So Would you say that hyperplasia can occur within the body?
They've seen it. They've seen it in cats, but not so much in humans. I think there have been one or two reported cases where someone has definitely had muscle fibers split into two, and the numbers of fibers have gone up. But normally in humans, no, it's about the same number of fibers, but each one is bigger.
You think that it could occur with, like, let's say, like some sort of supplementation?
I'm not discounting the possibility entirely, but I'm not really aware of one myself that does achieve that. If you do, let us know. I mean, that was
yeah. I'm always curious because within the bodybuilding community, we can go there just because I am a bodybuilder, and essentially, of course, when you use exogenous testosterone or these other hormones and stuff, it does cause for, like you said, hypertrophy within the muscle. But they say that when you use, like, let's say something like IGF-1 or growth hormone, then that wouldn't necessarily cause any hypertrophy. It would actually create new muscle cells and cause hyperplasia.
Okay.
After that, then more hypertrophy does occur.
All right. Cool.
So that was just something that I was curious if you had any knowledge on.
No, not on that one. That's a new one on me. Okay, cool.
Let me ask you a question about some of the athletes that you've worked with in the past. What would you say your knowledge is with performance enhancing supplementation or anything? Have you known of anybody? Would you consider it safe in any way?
What kind of supplementation? Sorry.
Like, for example, with some of the athletes you've worked in the past, like within the All Blacks.
Sure.
What was your role? I'll just reword this. What was your? We'll go here. What was your role that you played with them?
Okay, with the All Blacks, my specific role was in planning or helping the main physical fitness trainer to plan the training regimes that they were going to be undertaking on the basis of what are the actual movement patterns required of elite international rugby union players during match play. So my role was to actually analyze every single movement throughout the entire 80 minutes of play for every one of the 15 players on the field for 4 entire test matches, and then report back, here's how these guys moved. They ran this much of the time, they were walking this much of the time, they were tackling, they were being tackled, they were doing this, they were doing that, whatever it was. So that particular role with the All Blacks was not a nutritional role.
Okay.
In and of itself. However, I am aware of the nutritional ideas that are being espoused in the All Blacks organization. Reason being because I am acquainted with the chief trainer of the All Blacks, basically. It turns out he was my master's supervisor at university, so that's how I know him. That's actually how I got the in to do the job in the first place with the All Blacks. And they do espouse, they do promote a carnivorous diet for the All Blacks, and at least one of the All Blacks has decided to take that lifestyle up for himself and to live that lifestyle. The All Blacks management don't tell the guys what they must eat or how they say, this is what we espouse.
Yeah, of course.
This is what we suggest you do. This is why we're suggesting it. It's up to you. Just, in recent years, they've started to say, well, look, this idea that has been put forward for many, many years in exercise physiology, that you need a great, huge whack of carbs for energy during such events, and that you must, base your diet on starchy carbohydrates and all this kind of stuff. They've finally got around to going, yeah, not such a good idea. Actually, it looks like carnivory is a good thing. It doesn't negatively impact the performance of these athletes once they're adapted, and whether they're rugby players or whether they're cyclists or runners or whatever, it makes no difference. One of my clients is an ultra marathon runner that runs, upwards of 100 kilometers in a single day, basically, in one event. Well, it lasts longer than a day, but in a single event is what I'm saying. And he's, entirely carnivorous and has been for months and months and months. So, if it was true that, without the carbs you're going to bonk, he would have bonked well before 100 kilometers, wouldn't he?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there you go.
Since you've been involved with the professional team, now that's why I wanted to dive into, like, what do you think Because I'm just curious now. What do you believe is like the because like for example in baseball, American baseball, you had like times where drugs were kind of like a big deal. Like, does that occur in the sport like rugby as well?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I know that the All Black setup is clean in terms of that. There is a lot of internal checks and balances there. Um, the brand of the All Blacks obviously needs to be absolutely jealously protected. There's no way that the New Zealand Rugby Union would ever truck out a player and put a player on the field who is a drug cheat. They wouldn't allow it to happen.
Right.
I do know of various sort of drug cheating type things that do go on in professional sport. Certainly not in the All Blacks, for example. But I have heard of and I have seen examples personally out there in other organisations, shall we say, and in other events.
Right.
Cycling's a big one.
Yeah, huge. I know it's a
Huge.
topic, man, but it was something that somebody basically wanted to kind of ask, so I just want to throw that question in there.
Yeah.
Let's get back closer
Cool.
to on topic now. The next thing that I wanted to ask you was the difference between plant proteins and animal proteins. So, from my own studies, my own knowledge, we know that the animal source proteins are going to have a higher absorption rate. They're going to be more readily available to the body, as opposed to the plant versions of the protein. What would you say? Of course, I obviously you are 100% for the carnivorous lifestyle. So what would you say, like, as far as like the absorption rates, and is there a major difference? Like, let's say for example, choosing egg whites over a blended protein of hemp, pea, etc.
Got it. Okay. I mean, the first and most obvious major difference between plant and animal protein is that animal protein will contain all the essential amino acids, and plant proteins don't in any one sort of plant. So you need to combine, and anyone that has lived any kind of vegan lifestyle for any period of time will know about combining and know that you have to mix this with that to get a full spectrum of amino acids. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means you need to be a bit more planned about it and a bit more, have a bit more knowledge about it.
Right.
And that's fine. One of the second major thing that obviously pops straight up is that the amount of protein that you get per gram of food, when you're talking about plant sources, the amount of protein is a lot lower. Probably you've seen these this versus that type comparisons that vegan ideologues like to splash up on the internet that talks about, there's more protein in this broccoli and there's but once you work out per 100 per calories,
right,
it turns out that what we're talking about is like a small piece of steak versus like 100 grams of broccoli for the same amount of protein or something like that. So if you're trying to get protein in because you're bodybuilding or for whatever reason, you're going to struggle to get enough in, I think, personally, without eating, excuse my language, a fuck ton of food.
Right. And that was what happened to me. I was literally, if you want to go to a whole food diet without supplementing protein powder, then yes, it requires you to consume quite a bit of food. I think I was getting in roughly like 4,000 to 4,500 calories. And this was the most food I've ever eaten in my entire life just to be able to maintain myself, which I don't necessarily find to be a beneficial thing, because I really believe that the body wants to be more efficient, and the smaller amount of calories that we can consume and be able to maintain ourselves is actually better. It's less for the body. I don't know if you would happen to agree with that.
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting one, John, because actually, while you say I was eating, 4,000 and 5,000 calories of food, which you may well have been doing, in actual fact, what your body was absorbing out of that was probably, not much more than 2,500 maybe 3,000 depending on your lean body mass, which is, large in your case.
Right.
The thing about calorie, like you say, a calorie is a calorie, and there is X number of calories in this loaf of bread, for example, and you can go and look that. It's on the nutritional panel, or there's X number of calories in this steak. The fact of the matter is that a calorie is not a calorie. They're not equally absorbable. Basically, when you're eating a lot of whole food plant matter, for example, 80% of that you are shitting straight back out. That's what most of your shit is. It's unabsorbed, undigested fiber out of the plant matter you've been eating. One of the things you notice very quickly on a carnivorous diet, when you go onto a truly purely carnivorous diet, is that you actually shit a lot less often and a lot less volume. And you start thinking, oh shit, am I doing this wrong? Is there a problem here? Am I constipated? Do I need to panic? No, it's just that you're not shitting so much because there's not so much waste. Most of the plant matter you cannot absorb, you cannot digest. So you can say, I ate thousands and thousands and thousands of calories of plants. Maybe you did, but you didn't absorb that many. A calorie is a measurement of energy that you can get out of something if you put it in what's called a bomb calorimeter,
Right.
which is a piece of kit, which is a sealed chamber. You put the food sample in there, you exert heat on it until it combusts completely to carbon dioxide and water. In other words, you burn it, and then they measure the heat that comes off the thing when it burns, basically, which is great, except that that's not what your body does with your food. It doesn't combust it in a flame. You oxidize your food in a controlled fashion and a bunch of other reactions. And, I guess the analogy I often say to people on that one is, well, look, a calorie is a calorie, sure. A calorie is the measurement of heat that you'll get out of something if you burn it. Well, there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of calories in a lump of coal. But I challenge you to get fat eating coal, my friend. Your body can't absorb the coal. You can't digest the coal. There's nothing in the coal that's of any value to you.
Right.
Okay. And that's the same with plants, mostly. As I say, about 80% for most plants, you're just going to pass straight back out.
I can see that because, like I said, for the fact that I was consuming such a large amount of food, and for me to be able to maintain myself, it took quite a bit. So it absolutely makes sense that our bodies are not really truly absorbing most of the nutrients, which I guess for a person that loves to eat a lot of food, I don't necessarily see. It may not be a bad thing per se, but I'm all about efficiency, and especially for bodybuilding, that's really what it requires is more efficient nutrition.
Yep, you bet. And there are so many problems with filling your body up with plants in terms of your digestive system and all your other systems too. But let's just go to the digestive system. The constant abuse of your colon by having to deal with all this fiber, it irritates your colon. It's rough, fibrous stuff. Basically, it's like it's like passing sand a little bit, I suppose, if you want to think about it that way. And so that does damage, and it's hard on your colon to do that stuff. So there's a problem there. The fact that plant matter contains a whole bunch of anti-nutrients, which actually lock up a lot of your minerals and things so that you can't get those things and absorb those things.
Right. I'm glad. I don't mean to cut you off, man, but that was one thing that I come across during my vegan journey was whenever I was doing when I was getting ready for my competition, man. I noticed that I would fall into times where I would really start cramping up. So, you say, on paper, these foods have tons of minerals and vitamins and just electrolytes, which obviously would supposedly keep you from cramping, but it was the opposite effect that I was getting, and I really feel like that's due to the lack of absorption, and may in fact be due to the oxalates and all these certain things. You're basically.
I mean, at the end of the day, the plants are defending themselves against being eaten, and the way they do that is to discourage you from bothering eating them, and the way they do that is to lock the nutrients up so that you can't absorb them. I
Right.
mean, the way a ruminant gets energy out of eating grass is by fermenting it in 4 stomachs, using a whole bunch of bacteria to break down all the cellulose and stuff into short chain fatty acids, which are 100% saturated, by the way,
Right.
and then elongating those into long chain fatty acids. Okay. So even the grass eaters are actually on an almost 100% saturated fatty acid diet. They're not actually digesting the plants. The bacteria in their guts are breaking the plants down into fats, and those fats are being absorbed by those ruminants.
Uh,
So that's how that one works. Okay. You're not a ruminant. You don't have 4 stomachs. You don't have stones in one of them. You don't have the bacteria that will deal with cellulose and break that stuff down. You cannot absorb and digest fiber in plants. You have some bacteria, if you eat a lot of plants, that will break down some of that, and you'll get some short chain fatty acids out of that. But as I say, most of it will just pass straight through and out the other end because you can't use it. Based on that, you've also got the anti-nutrients locking up the minerals and things so that you can't have them. They're not bioavailable. So just because you can go and look at some computer program that tells you, oh, look, my broccoli has got so much iron in it or whatever, that doesn't mean you can get it. It doesn't mean you can have that broccoli's iron. It doesn't want you to have it.
what would you say the percentage then of your body's ability to be able to absorb, like say, iron from spinach or broccoli, then, as opposed to heme iron?
Right, so heme iron is the animal form. It's the form that you can absorb. It's the form that you'll get out of meat and
Don't they
organs
also
and
say
things.
that if you consume too much heme iron, would it be considered toxic to the body?
Yeah, there is an idea around that as well. I haven't seen any convincing evidence that that's so. I've also never seen necessarily a case of anyone that's had a toxic level of iron from heme iron. But I'm not discounting the possibility that it might happen if someone eats too much heme iron.
Right.
As I say, I've never seen it though, and I've never seen a validated report of it myself. So yeah, but compared with the heme iron, which is very absorbable, plant iron is almost zero absorption rate. It's yeah, you might as well not bother.
Right. And there was one thing, man, is that what is there some different vitamins, beta carotene, for example, um, vitamin K. So
Yep.
the more absorbable version is going to be vitamin K2, which is it's essentially going to only come strictly from animal source.
Mm-hmm.
We can dive into the other things that I remember Garth Davis kind of mentioning within that video that he put out. It was a
Yep.
list. It was a laundry list, man. And that was the
Yep.
one thing that kind of just really opened my eyes more or less, is that he's very aware of the lack of the plant-based diet. And I'm not saying that there's not going to be healthy people that follow a plant-based 100% plant-based diet. I feel like there's going to be healthy people regardless of what venture they decide to go on within their nutrition. But there is going to be that lack that happens, and
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you're going to eventually have to follow up with some sort of supplementation in order to be able to make up for that difference. And that's the kind of thing that I just really feel like is a bit of a concern, because once you get to that point, then I believe your health is no longer in your hands.
Correct. I mean, even like the difference between a guy like Garth Davis and a different vegan ideologue doctor, let's say Michael Greger, for example, is that Greger comes online and tells people that the vegan diet is the answer and the vegan diet is healthy and good for you and it's indicated and that's the one you should follow. So that, and he does that, to be honest with you. I've caught him 4 or 5 times, and there's 4 or 5 videos on my channel that people can go and have a look at if they like. But it's not even mistakes, it's not even errors that he's making. He's coming online and he's making videos about, he says, I've read all the research so you don't have to. What he really means is, please don't read it, because if you do, you're going to catch me telling lies about what's in it. Literally, for example, he made a video where he came on and he said that ground beef, is more insulinogenic than white rice, white potatoes, and white pasta. And here's a study. He said, here's a study, and he gave the reference to the study that showed that this was the case, etc., etc., etc.
So
And he
this
said,
is
and you can go and check this out for yourself. He said, so you have a look at my video where I said, Mike, I did. Thanks. Yeah, I did. Go and have a look at the reference. And you're lying.
yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to check that one out. I never.
Lying, not even making mistakes, lying about what's in the research. So Michael Greger will tell you that the vegan diet is good for you and you should do it. The difference between him and Garth Davis is Garth Davis says the vegan diet is not about your health. It's an ideology. He's being honest in that respect. It's not about your health. It's an ideology. Okay. And you will need to supplement.
Quite a bit of times about
and then he goes off and says, here's why meat's bad for you, which he's got wrong. And I'm going to have him on about that on Friday afternoon, stateside time, hopefully.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing, then, is that they essentially brainwash you into this way of thinking that, consuming these sorts of food are essentially bad for you. But we've been eating them for thousands upon thousands of years. And I mean, I had this discussion with my mother. She told me back when she was young in Puerto Rico, things like cancer and all these other diseases no one even really knew about these things. It wasn't really a thing. And people could sit here and say it's because of the fact that, the technology today is able to find them a lot easier and all this stuff. But, I actually feel, and from what I've personally been able to see, is that the lifespans from let's say two generations ago were much longer than we have today. I've actually, from what I'm witnessing, I see that people's lifespans are actually much shorter now. Yeah. And these people are dying from these, from these diseases. I feel like they're just new diseases. Autism being another thing that's really has kind of skyrocketed. I mean, even whenever I was in grade school, we're talking about 20 years ago, there was literally like, there were in the special kids class, there might have been like 2 or 3 kids in these rooms, and they were just mentally retarded, or they had, sort of like a mental disease. It had nothing to do with autism. Now you have literally 2 rooms full of these kids, with the majority of them having autism. Yeah, I really feel like a lot of this stuff is lifestyle, diet.
Yeah, absolutely. Lifestyle, diet, medications, non-native electromagnetic frequencies.
Oh, that's another thing, man. We could talk about.
Yeah. Do you know Dr. Jack Cruz?
I'm not aware of him. No. I need to check.
Okay, I had a chat with Dr. Jack Cruz a few months ago. Actually, maybe 4 or 5 months ago now. It was quite a while ago. Jack is the electromagnetic frequencies guru. He's quite a strange character. He's good fun. He likes to talk using terminologies that most people won't understand. I often say to people, like, a lot of what Jack says is good. If you want it in English, just tell me what he said and I'll translate it for you, sort of thing. But he'll do things like, he'll sit there and we had an interview and he spent the whole time with an infrared light on him. So he was bathed in this red light. It was like, are you on the Starship Enterprise and it's red alert, or what's going on? That's just how he lives his life. He believes that's good for you, and he's all about avoiding blue light at certain times of the day, and especially blue light that's not from the sun, right. And artificial light and all that kind of stuff. And he puts all our ills and all our modern stuff down to electromagnetic stuff. Look, I think there's a lot of merit in a lot of the things he says, but I'm kind of a bit more along the lines of, I think that stuff's important, but I think the diet's absolutely crucial as well. So I think that's the thing we need to get right first and foremost, is the diet, and then look at your additional things like your electromagnetic frequency exposure, things like grounding or electrical grounding, or sometimes it's called earthing. Have you heard of that one?
Yeah, we walk around there.
Yeah, so walk around with barefoot on the ground as much of the time as possible. I actually electrically ground myself at night when I'm sleeping. I have a 3-pin socket a normal 3-pin plug from the wall. I've taken the 2 electrical wires off. I've only got the earth wire still connected to the earth pin. The other 2 pins have got nothing on them anymore. Plug it into the wall, strip the other end of the earth wire, wrap it around my ankle, put a sock on to hold it against my skin to make an electrical connection, go to sleep. Sweet. Done deal.
Might have to look into that one as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I've got videos both on my YouTube channel and on my Patreon about all of that and why I do that as well. But I'll just give you one example of that one for free as well. When you are electrically connected to the earth, either barefoot on the ground or the way I was just talking about connecting to your household electrical ground circuit does the same thing. Immediately, that second, as soon as you are connected, the viscosity of your blood, the thickness of your blood, reduces by a factor of 3.
Wow.
And it's because your the formed elements, the red blood cells and the white blood cells and everything in your blood take on different electrochemical charges from the connection to the earth, and they repel each other, whereas they were clumping together before. So when you have your blood clumping together, it's a lot thicker and a lot harder to push around. So your blood pressure goes up. So you get inflamed. So you get heart disease, like we spoke about right at the beginning.
Right.
If you spend 12 hours a night, if you can sleep for 12 hours or 8 hours a night or whatever it is, grounded, then for 8 hours your heart is not under the same pressure because your blood is thinner by a factor of 3 if you're just connected to the earth. And that's just one example. And another one is that it changes your brainwave activity to a more relaxed state immediately. And then if you disconnect from the ground, then your blood immediately, that second, thickens back up. Off. It's incredible. It's it's like people think this is crack pottery or some sort of crazy shit. Check it out. It's on my channel. Yep, it's well worth a look-see.
So let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
What would you consider is the real key to health and longevity then, nutritionally?
Nutritionally? Look, everybody's a little bit different. I'm not sure about the whole, the same answer applies absolutely to everybody, but I'm pretty convinced that for 99.999999 whatever percent of the population, the absolute answer for optimal health and optimal longevity is absolutely a carnivorous lifestyle. It's highly, highly anti-inflammatory, according to all the measurements and according to all the anecdotes. The studies that talk about meat being associated with inflammation are not carnivorous lifestyles. They are mixed lifestyles.
Right.
And we've spoken about that already. That's the Randall cycle. Yes, that causes inflammation. That's, we know about that. That's just, misinformation by someone with an agenda. If you eat a carnivorous lifestyle, no carbs, no plants, inflammation just drops out. And you said it yourself, N=1 with Sean Baker, for example. No C-reactive protein, no sign of inflammation. The same with Michaela Peterson, the same with Jordan Peterson.
Right.
The same with any of these high-profile carnivore people. The same with myself. I've had a lifelong, issue with various inflammatory type disorders. And pretty much a couple of weeks after I started my journey down the carnivorous way of life, solved, sorted, not a problem anymore. And then every time I cheat on myself and I go back to eating some plant matter because it just happens to be there, or it's a special occasion, or it won't hurt me, I just have this little bit, I'll think, no, it destroys me every time for, like a few days I need.
So do you feel that it's the combination then, rather? Because I've seen the exact same, obviously, plant-based diet. I've looked into people's blood works and seen, that their C-reactive protein levels are basically non-existent as well.
Yeah.
The only difference I guess I would feel is with the majority of them, their cholesterol levels would measure rather low, which I feel like at some point would essentially be non-beneficial if it gets too low.
Correct.
I really feel like that we definitely need some cholesterol to be within the body and, like you said, functioning, being able to increase our hormonal function and so forth. But that's definitely extremely.
Yep. So I mean, like the carnivorous diet, you get that lack of inflammation, you get that sense of well-being, you get all the healthy saturated fat that you need, which you'll struggle to get on a plant-based diet, to be fair. You get all the fat-soluble nutrients, which again you'll struggle to get on a plant-based diet. Your mineral status will be fantastic, which again it will not be on a plant-based diet. Initially, you will get the reduced inflammation on the plant-based diet when you've been on the standard diet, yes. But sooner or later, those deficiencies will start to show. The inflammation will build back up again. If for no other reason, plant foods, especially starchy and sugary ones, contain a lot of deuterium. Okay, so deuterium is a form of hydrogen which is about twice the weight of a hydrogen, a normal hydrogen, and the reason for it is because it's got a neutron as well as a proton. So a normal hydrogen is just a proton with an electron,
Right.
And a deuterium is a proton and a neutron and an electron, so it's twice the weight basically. And deuterium does not feed mitochondria, does not feed ATP production in the mitochondria as effectively as hydrogen does. So when you talk about the carbohydrates, so carbohydrates are things that are carbons and hydrogens. So you've got the carbon skeletons and all the hydrogens. You've probably seen the diagrams a million times. Those H's on the plant-based carbohydrates, they should really put D for most of them, because most of them are deuterium and not hydrogen. And so actually that will reduce your mitochondrial function. And one of the artifacts, one of the results of reducing mitochondrial function is inflammation, which again will lead you to heart disease, diabetes, insulin resistance, obesity, Alzheimer's disease, many forms of cancer, early death, misery. Yeah, all of that.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is all rather interesting, man. I'm really enjoying this conversation with you because, I mean, I could sit here and listen to all this, and it's definitely new to me. And because I don't like to really kind of feel like I'm in some sort of box, rather, and believe in one way or the other. I really like to look into the scientific evidence that backs everything, that to make sure that it really does truly work. And that's where, I don't necessarily like to look at epidemiological studies because I don't feel like there's really any true science that backs any of it up. Simply just from what I've read and studied into, it's just simply questionnaires and essentially just doing follow-ups and stuff like that. Yeah.
So, there's a video I've done on my channel, and it's called Epidemiology is Horse Shit. And I think people should go and watch that because I agree with you entirely. Epidemiology is not science, remotely. Epidemiology is a means by which we can inform on theories that we might have a bit as regards the relationship between variables in a correlative or associative way, in a coincidental way. Epidemiology is unable to inform on mechanisms, is unable to form on the etiology of disease process, the causes of disease process, I should say. Basically, epidemiology is smoke and mirrors, a cool mathematical wall pulling over your eyes and stuff. And it's just, go and have a look at that video. I mean, the reason I call it horseshit is because it's horseshit. It's not science. Yeah. So I agree with you. It's just rubbish. It's nonsense.
And that's what a lot of the plant-based doctors, the vegan doctors they essentially use for, and I believed them for a while until I actually started to look into the stuff myself and just, and I really didn't see, because, correlation doesn't necessarily cause causation. But they essentially like to use this where there's smoke, there's fire kind of, mindset, which again, I can see it, but I don't, and again, it's like, that's where the whole LDL and, cholesterol causing heart disease and all this stuff is just, I didn't, like I said, when I actually look at the evidence and I look at anecdotes and people in general, a lot of these things weren't happening unless they had a bad diet or they had bad habits like smoking, doing different things that would literally cause inflammation within the body. So definitely, I really feel that inflammation is truly the root cause, and it's the root cause of disease in general,
Yes,
as opposed to the consumption of one particular food or the other.
correct.
Um, Man, because like for myself, I wanted to talk about something that I experienced. Like I had very little gastro distress whenever I was consuming lots of fruits, because
Mhm.
of like I just feel like it had more to do with the insoluble fibers. But as soon as I started introducing a higher protein diet using whole foods nutrition, um, those tag along foods like beans, lentils, things like that have high levels of insoluble fibers and, like you were mentioning, anti nutrients as well. And
Yep.
that's whenever I started to really start dealing with like things like diarrhea and
Hmm.
and gastro problems. And yeah, that was kind of pretty much the end of my vegan journey. It was just like I realized like I couldn't necessarily do it. Again, eating whole foods because I just don't believe in consuming these things like Beyond Meat, these things like what we have basically is wheat gluten,
Hmm.
things like that. It just didn't make sense to me to be able to have to consume these sorts of foods because they're highly inferior to the real thing.
Yep.
Because with real meat and all these things, you're getting real nutrients, you're getting real vitamins and so forth.
Hmm.
What's your perspective on that?
Yep, absolutely agree. I mean, the issues you're talking about there with beans and things like that sounds, like guesswork, I know, but it sounds like lectins was the issue there, probably.
Right.
Plant lectins, which is a very another very dangerous plant-based anti-nutrient type thing. Lectins bind up various different proteins and cause all sorts of problems for people. Gluten is a massive, massive one in terms of gluten intolerance and celiac disease and stuff throughout the human population. And basically, it's because we've added this so-called food into our diet in the last really 8 to 10,000 years, which in terms of our evolution, in terms of the development of our DNA and our physiology and stuff, is just a flash in the pan. There's just no time at all. We're not evolved for that. We're not designed for that. We can't cope with that. Um, so we pay the price for it basically. And you look at what's happened, even for example, to the size of our jaw and our the structure of the arch of our teeth in the last 10,000 years. That's where we get all this problem with wisdom teeth and because the size is all atrophied down
Right.
because we became more reliant on the agriculture and less on the meats. In the same 10,000 years, our stature as humans has dropped, by 6 inches on average. We're less powerful, less muscular than we were, and we're less robust in terms of our overall health. And our brains have shrunk because basically your brain is, like 80-90% cholesterol, fat. The reason that we managed to develop and grow the large brains that we have is because A, we learned how to hunt meat, and B, we learned how to cook it. So, that's basically how that one worked.
So with you, how long have you been following a carnivorous lifestyle?
Okay, what are we looking at? We're looking at just short of 6 months now. I did 20 plus years keto, and it sorted out my health problems to the sort of 75-80% mark, I guess, give or take. But I was never properly healthy in my entire life. And it was really only about 6 months ago that I decided to go down this route. It was on the basis of looking at studies and looking at people's stories on YouTube and whatever else, looking at the Sean Bakers and the Petersons and people like that, because it was kind of a newish sort of thing at the time, I guess. Although the carnivorous diet is not a new thing. Obviously, humans have been doing it for hundreds of thousands of years, but it coming back into big, yeah, the carnivorous lifestyle modern version is a new thing, I guess. That's why we don't have the research on it.
Right.
At this point.
There was a study done, like I believe in the 1920s,
Yep.
where
Okay.
they ate like basically just meat for a whole year.
Okay. Cool.
But that's the
Mm,
only one that I know about. I know that Sean Baker talked about it in
yeah.
one brief instance.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong. They all died of scurvy.
It
Yeah.
did show that after the full year, they had no nutritional deficiencies. There were instances where their cholesterol levels had risen,
Yep.
quite a bit. But
But but we know
but
that's not a bad thing. So
right, there were one guy that it was because he had gotten sick a few times, and every time that he had gotten sick and they tested his blood, his cholesterol levels had gone up. But there
mm,
was the other person that also was a part of the of this uh, yeah, the practice more or less. And his didn't really elevate too much. I think it ranged between 200 and 300 at the max.
okay.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was the one instance they did a study on it. So I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just I like to look at true evidence, real, like I said, real science, and
Mm,
yeah, man, it's just that's where I guess the failure of just finding these things to be truthful more or less, and
okay.
I do
Yeah.
discuss with you.
Well, I mean, I guess what I can suggest to you, John, and also to all your people is if you want science, if you want numbers, if you want to understand these processes, for goodness sake, go and sub to my channel. Go and have a look at my Patreon as well. And I know I've been banging on about that, but that's how I make a living, so I make no apologies for it. I left academia permanently in 2016. The reason being is because I was prepared to get up on my hind legs and say, the stuff that you're telling us to teach these kids is not only wrong, it's dangerous and it's killing people. Here's what the science actually says. And if I don't have a barrier to push, if I'm not being paid off, if I'm not being paid off by a drug company, there's a thing in academia. It's actually enshrined in the legislative system of all the Western countries. It's a law, basically. It's called academic freedom. It says that an academic is free to hold and espouse any opinion he or she should see fit, whether that's popular or not. Basically, it protects the ability of an intellectual person to say, here is my take on the science. And obviously they spent 17 years trying to shut me down, and they spent 17 years trying to tell me that I must teach people that their diet should be 65% carbohydrates of a starchy nature, whole grains are better, um, that cholesterol is bad and causes heart disease, that statins are an indicated lifesaver for people. Follow the party line, be a good boy, do as you're told, take your middling salary of sort of $80,000 a year, basically, and shut up. Or else we'll come gunning for you, we'll make your life a hell. And they did. So by 2016, I'd basically had a complete breakdown because I'd been bullied and picked on so much by colleagues who were trying to get me to stop telling students who are paying good money the truth about the science. And so I was really, really very unwell for several years after that. I was beat up to the point where, I was wondering whether I wanted to continue living, basically. And so I spent 2.5 years recovering from that career, actually. And so it's only in the last 6 months that I was healthy enough to start. So, okay, right, now I'm ready to work out where I need to go with my diet. And it turned out that was carnivore, absolutely. What do I need to do with my career? It's YouTube and Patreon. And so the beauty of that is that I am not a member of any of these professional organizations anymore. I'm not a member of the Physiological Society. They can't tell me what to do. I don't work for a university. They can't tell me, you can't say that, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. What I can do is tell the absolute truth, and I've got no agenda. I'm not selling any products. I do have a distributorship for a nutraceutical product. I'm pretty inactive in it. I have it for my own personal use. I don't sell it. I've got a video on my channel about the stuff if you're interested, but that's where that one ends. So basically, I'm here to sell education. I'm here to be a consultant to people. I'm here to reassure people when they want to go down the carnivorous lifestyle and their aunt tells them that they're going to die of a heart attack next week, or their friends tell them that, oh no, that's bad cholesterol, is going to kill you, or I'm kind of the voice of reason there, and I'm also a bit of a coach that says, okay, if you want to do the carnivorous lifestyle, you don't just go off by yourself and do it without any idea of what you're doing. You need someone to make sure you're on the right track. So that's where my career is now. So yeah, look, if people want to know about the science and they want to get that from someone who and I've got nothing against vegans or the vegan lifestyle or any of that kind of stuff. The thing that I object to, the thing that gets my heckles up, the thing that I go online and start raging at people about are these people that come online and tell fucking lies. Okay, because they've got an agenda. People like Michael Greger, who will come online and say, the vegan diet is good and indicated and healthy throughout the lifestyle. We know it's not. The science is absolutely clear on that. That is a lie, Michael. People like Garth Davis, who, as again, for a reminder, we'll be talking to this weekend, who comes online and says, as a carnivore, you can't get enough vitamin C. Okay, that's not true, Garth. That's a lie. Okay, we'll talk about that with him over the weekend. People like, Mick the Vegan that come online and splash up, the study and that study for 3 seconds each. Oh, look, here's a study that proves this and that and the other thing. Absolute bloody nonsense, Mick or Mike or whatever the hell your name is. One of the absolute worst ones, obviously, is Richard Burgess. God, highly correlated, boys and girls. He and I have had a lot of, backwards and forwards.
Yeah, I was actually looking forward to you guys going with the debate, but I guess
that's okay. That's okay because he's taken on a debate with Bobby, and I'm coaching Bobby. So, in terms of the science,
looking forward to that. Because I like your opinion. I like that you hold so highly to it. I don't know. I look at some of these studies, and let's say, for example, the people that they have these epidemiological studies behind, and I guess what they say is that they follow a plant-based diet, which is basically majority plants as opposed to just strictly plants. And still have some sort of animal foods within the diet. And that's kind of where I feel, I don't know, for me personally, I feel like that would be more or less the, I guess you can say, I guess the most optimal diet. As far as like human health now, because of course, things that I do, any sort of like too much protein in the diet is going to have some sort of detrimental effect, regardless of, at least just how I see it, long term, is going to have some sort of like detrimental health effects. But I don't know. I still find that a good balance, of course, not necessarily too much fat within the diet or too many carbs, or too much protein rather. So I just kind of wanted to throw that in there.
Sure. Okay. I mean, that's an approach that a lot of people have used and a lot of people espouse. It's one I probably would have agreed with 5 or 10 years ago even. It's one I would have been espousing to people myself back then. I guess that my ongoing education of myself, my ongoing study in the last 5 years has led me to a different conclusion. I'm absolutely convinced that the best possible thing that everybody could possibly do is to absolutely minimize the intake of all plant materials at all times. And I don't think there's a problem with too much protein in that circumstance. If again you've got a lot of plant matter as well and a lot of protein, then you might have too much protein, and that could be a problem. Yeah,
right. That is true. That is true. I mean, for what the science shows, there is no, like, if you consume lots of protein, I believe they did a study where they had people consuming roughly three grams per pound of body weight for a year, and there were no effects on the kidneys or liver or anything like that. The only way that it showed any effect is if you already had some a condition prior to, let's say you consuming this particular diet. That would be the only way that it would have some sort of detrimental effect with the overconsumption of protein. So I definitely see that. But yeah. I mean, I really to be honest. I just, I don't know. I look at everything as a whole. I still find I find rather some benefits in eating fruit and certain
Sure.
vegetables.
Sure.
Because I look at, from what I've, experienced in just, let's say, Puerto Ricans, for example, what we consume. They still eat plenty of fish. They
Mm-hmm.
actually do eat quite a bit of pork as well.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But they had things like fruits,
Yep.
different root vegetables and whatnot. And
Mm-hmm.
they had, I feel like back in the day, their lifespans were equally as long as the ones that these guys, that the people are promoting now, as far as
Mm-hmm.
like where these epidemiological studies have occurred.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I mean, I have to look more into the science and see kind of where you're coming from as well,
Mm.
so that I can get a better understanding of.
I mean, at the end of the day, the science can give you some ideas. The science can inform on things a lot, but the science will never give you an absolute answer. I mean, I can say my opinion based on my reading of the science is very clear. I'm quite unambiguous about what I believe. I'm quite happy to tell people what the reasons why I believe that are. But at the end of the day, in any situation, there are uncontrolled degrees of freedom. There are things that are not accounted for. They are not controlled in any kind of experimental study. You're talking about, diets that have fish and pork and root vegetables and fruits in them, and those people had great lifespans. Yep, sure, they also didn't probably have EMF radiation poisoning,
Right.
5G. They probably didn't have, watch 30, 40 hours a week of television. They probably slept, 8 hours solidly every night.
Absolutely. I'm sure they live much less stressful life than we live today.
Exactly. So, the, where is the tipping point? Where is the point where there's the straw that breaks the camel's back and destroys your health? All I can say to people is, look, here's what the science tells me about how to minimize the chances of you developing a health problem. And all things considered, modern lifestyle considered, the way we live our lives considered currently, I'm absolutely convinced. The more I learn about plants, the more I understand they are not meant for human beings. Yeah, that's kind of where I head. But I'm not some kind of totalitarian. I'm not some kind of food Nazi. I'm not like a vegan ideologue that's going to shit all over you if you don't agree with my ideology and do exactly what I think you should do.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Today, people are free, obviously, to do whatever they want. It's your life, and I'm not here to tell anybody, what to eat or make any kind of statements like some of these other people do. I'm just going to tell you what I believe and why I believe it, and it's for you to take that on board or not.
Most definitely.
Cool.
All right, I got one more question for you.
Okay.
Um, Other than the things we've already discussed, would you happen to have any more things that you've seen as far as like just myths within fitness, nutrition as a whole, with every day? Because I mean, you know, again, I can listen to what you're saying. As far as like, just basically excluding plant matter as much as possible, and I can see that. I feel like there definitely needs to be a balance, more or less, just from what my own personal experience. Because I don't know, I just don't. I think that we can consume these foods, but it just doesn't need to be in excess more than anything. But anyways,
there are people who don't do well on a zero carb lifestyle. There are people for whom that's a problem on the basis that it's an issue with their mood and their psychological state. So that's why I'm saying there's not one answer for everybody. There's just a good answer that suits almost everybody. And there are people who say, look, I absolutely, like my girlfriend's one of them. She will not subscribe to the carnivorous lifestyle. Even though I sort of give her a good friendly ribbing about it all the time and say, you got to give up those plants and all this. I know she's not going to. She doesn't want to. She enjoys it. All power to her. It's her life, sort of thing. So that's fine. In terms of mythologies, in terms of the dietary side of things, I mean, the obvious ones are, balanced diet is a good thing. That's a loaded word, balance, isn't it? We are predisposed to believe that if something is balanced, it's good.
yeah, I mean, because they want to say that you can have your processed foods, and as long as it's not whatever. I honestly, even though I do consume some of them, don't get me wrong, I'm going to have some every now and then just because I'm, you know,
They're human.
this.
We're all human.
Yeah, we grew up in this life, you know, within this time period, and these things are around us, and it's like sometimes it's going to be hard to basically say no, and they are hella tasty. But I do, if there's one thing that I can truly believe is just the introduction of these processed foods, where they've essentially removed all of the um, all of the enzymes and stuff from the food that allow things to be able to break down by themselves naturally. I feel like that's really been the true key to essentially the deterioration of our health as a whole and causing a lot of these issues. Um, but yeah, you know, it's just yeah. Again, once again, I still find lots of benefits within consuming, let's say, fruits. I know some people are going to say that they, you know, now of course that they have too much sugar in them nowadays, as opposed to their more natural versions, where the, you know, I believe some of them are hybridized, especially things like bananas and such. I really feel like what's your stance on like antioxidants then?
Okay, I mean, I think antioxidants are needed in the diet of someone who consumes a lot of plant matter, because plant matter subjects you to oxidative stress in a big way.
Got you.
And you know, serendipitously, I guess the antioxidants come with the same foodstuffs. They're in the plants that are causing the oxidative stress in the first place. The issue, however, with dietary antioxidants is most of them are completely unavailable biologically. Why? Because the plant doesn't want you to have them. There are anti-nutrients that lock them out, basically. You know, and that's one of the many reasons why someone on a plant-based diet, or a diet containing a significant amount of plant, will need much more vitamin C than someone who is not. Okay. The true natural design, the way we are actually supposed to get antioxidant effect, is actually not from our diets at all. It's from grounding to the earth. That's why I suggest that grounding to the earth is a good idea for as much of the time as possible. When you ground to the earth, the electrical connection to the earth, either bare feet on the ground or that method I was talking about earlier, what actually happens is there is an almost inexhaustible supply of free electrons around the surface of the earth. And when you're connected to it, your body can absorb those electrons. Free radicals, the things that cause oxidative damage, are basically things that have had electrons ripped out of them. So basically, if you connect to the earth and absorb electrons out of the earth, those electrons join in where they've been ripped out previously, and they actually repair these free radicals and stop them from doing the damage in the first place. It's by far and away more effective than any antioxidant you could ever eat whatsoever. It's something that people don't really understand. There's not a lot of science about it, but there is some, which you'll see on my site, because I do cite all my references. Grounding electrically is far, far, far more powerful antioxidant-wise than any antioxidant you could ever dream of eating. The design was never for you to get antioxidants from your food, or indeed that you should actually need so many.
Right. Very interesting perspective, man.
So there's that one.
All right. Is there any? I guess you could say. Is there anything else you'd like to kind of chime in on, discuss before we?
I think we've covered a lot this evening, or this morning, my time. It's now 20 minutes to 4 in the morning.
Okay.
So yeah. So there you go. You know, take one for the team. I'm very pleased to do it, and I'm absolutely chuffed to be invited to come on your channel, John. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope that people gained something from it. I hope that they, really, I didn't want to sort of dump too much science and be too sort of technical here. What I really wanted to sort of do from my point of view is to let people know that I exist, that I'm out there, that they can come to my channel for that stuff. I am all about the science. I also am about racking up the vegans, calling them lots of short words, getting them pissed off, getting them trying to get me deplatformed off YouTube. That's what's been happening today, boys and girls. That's great fun.
I realize a lot of the vegans that are essentially on my channel weren't going to be a big fan of me bringing you on, but at the end of the day, my biggest thing is giving everyone a platform to speak and just hearing everyone's perspective when it comes to nutrition and just all of this stuff in general. Just understanding your personal perspective on these things and why you think what you think, and and so forth. Because I really feel like everyone should have a voice, and I definitely love to have you back on at some point as well, man.
Love to.
Yeah,
I'd be very, very pleased to come back.
yeah, I enjoyed this.
So long as you don't get too much hate mail for having that goddamn
Sure.
carnivore devil man, bull man, bad bull man.
Right. Now, at the end of the day, man, it is what it is, dude. It's just I don't care. We're all gonna live. We all have our ways of thinking, our ways of being, and I appreciate every perspective when it comes to all of this, man. Because, like you mentioned before, science is just is. I really truly believe we should be able to test all things in order to find out what the truth is. No one's gonna know the truth. We could sit here and cite whatever different things, and unless you can actually be able to practice it for yourself and figure out what works best for you, because like you also mentioned, I feel like even though we're all different in a way, yeah, we're all the same as well. So yeah, it was absolutely great, man. It was great to have you on. Great conversation together.
All right, awesome. Thanks very much, John. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man.
All right.